The words stung like a winter wind cutting through an open coat. I stood in the kitchen, my hands still dusted with flour from the bread I'd been kneading, staring at my daughter. Sarah. Her arms were crossed, her brow furrowed with that mix of worry and frustration I'd seen too often lately. At 32, she thought she knew what was best for me. Beside her, my son, Michael, nodded in agreement, his jaw tight, as if he'd rehearsed this intervention. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have, each second a reminder that time was the enemy they thought they were protecting me from. Dad, you're 70, Sarah said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. Traveling halfway across the world. It's not safe. Not anymore. Why don't you just stay here? Watch the house while we're gone. You love this place. The house. This old, creaking Victorian with its sagging porch and chipped paint. The one I'd raised them in after their mother passed. It was more than a house site, was a museum of memories. But it wasn't my cage. Not yet. I wiped my hands on the apron. The one Emily had sewn for me decades ago. Its faded daisies a quiet rebellion against their practicality. I'm not dead, Sarah, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not asking for permission. Michael stepped forward, ever the diplomat. We're just worried. Dad. The flights. The time zones. The unpredictability. What if something happens? What if? Those two words had haunted me since Emily's diagnosis. Since the endless hospital visits and the quiet nights when I'd sit by her bedside, wondering what life would be without her. I'd spent years answering that question, and I wasn't about to let it define me now. I'll be fine, I said, turning back to the dough, pressing it harder than necessary. You two go on your trip. I'll watch the house. They exchanged glances, relieved but uneasy, as if they'd won a battle but sensed the war wasn't over. That night, as they packed for their anniversary getaway to Paris, I sat in my study, the glow of my old desk lamp casting shadows on the world map pinned to the wall. My fingers traced the routes I'd taken in my youth, Morocco's bustling souks, the windswept cliffs of Ireland, the humid jungles of Vietnam. Each pin marked a story, a piece of me that refused to fade. Emily had been with me for most of those, her laughter echoing in every memory. They thought I was too old to travel, too old to live. By midnight, the house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. I pulled my suitcase from the attic, the one I hadn't touched since Emily's last trip with me to Santorini. The leather was scuffed, the zipper stiff, but it felt like an old friend. I packed lightly a few shirts, a pair of sturdy boots, my journal, and Emily's scarf, the one she'd worn when we danced under the stars in Tuscany. It still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. The next morning, I left a note on the kitchen counter, gone to see the world. House is fine. Love. Dad. I drove to the airport before dawn, the radio playing old jazz tunes that reminded me of simpler days. The ticket agent raised an eyebrow when I handed her my passport, but she didn't question me. The destination didn't matter as much as the act of going. I chose Istanbul, a city I'd never seen, a place where East met West, where history whispered in every corner. It felt right. As the plane ascended, the world below shrank into a patchwork of lights, and I felt a weight lift. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was still alive, that my heart still beat for adventure, for the unknown. Emily would have understood. She always did. The flight was long, and my knees ached, but the anticipation kept me sharp. When I landed in Istanbul, the air was thick with spice and salt, the call to prayer weaving through the chaos of the airport. I hailed a taxi, my suitcase rattling in the trunk, and headed toward the heart of the city. The driver, a man with a crooked smile, asked in broken English, "First time here?" "First time in a long time," I replied, gazing out at the minarets piercing the skyline. The hotel was modest, tucked in a narrow street near the Hagia Sophia. My room had a view of the Bosphorus, its waters shimmering under the midday sun. I sat by the window, journaling my first impressions, the cacophony of street vendors, the scent of roasted chestnuts, the way the city pulsed with life. It was overwhelming, but it was exactly what I needed. That afternoon, I wandered through the Grand Bazaar, my senses assaulted by colors and sounds. A young woman, maybe 25, with dark eyes and a warm smile, offered me a cup of apple tea. Her name was Isla, and she ran a small stall selling hand-woven scarves. "You look like a traveler," she said, her English accented but clear. "I used to be," I said, sipping the tea. "Trying to be again." She laughed, a sound that reminded me of Emily. "Age is just a number. Offend him. The heart decides where you go." Her words stayed with me as I explored further, each step a defiance of my children's fears, of my own doubts. I wasn't just an old man wandering aimlessly. I was rediscovering the man I'd always been, the one who chased horizons, who believed the world was too big to stay still. By evening, I stood on a rooftop terrace, watching the sunset paint the city gold. My phone buzzed. Sarah, probably frantic after finding my note. I didn't answer. Not yet. They needed to understand that I wasn't running away. I was running toward something. The next day, I joined a small tour group to visit the Topkapi Palace. The guide, an elderly man named Mehmet, had a voice like gravel but eyes that sparkled with stories. He noticed my limpy old knee injury, acting up, and offered me his arm without a word. I took it, grateful for the kindness of a stranger. As we walked through the palace's opulent halls, he spoke of history, of sultans and conquests, but also of love and loss. "This place," he said, gesturing to the intricate tiles, "reminds us that nothing lasts forever, but everything leaves a mark." I thought of Emily, of the mark she'd left on me. I thought of my children, who loved me but didn't see me. Not really. I wasn't just their father, the man who fixed their bikes and bandaged their knees. I was James, the wanderer, the dreamer, the man who refused to let age dictate his story. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not too old. I'm just old enough to know what matters." The days in Istanbul blurred into a tapestry of experiences, each thread vibrant and fleeting. I woke early, my body stiff but my spirit alight, eager to taste the city's pulse. The streets were a labyrinth, and I let myself get lost, trusting I'd find my way. I didn't need a map. Instinct had always been my guide, even when my knees weren't. One morning, I found myself at the Spice Bazaar, where the air was thick with saffron and cumin. A vendor, an old man with hands like leather, offered me a pinch of sumac. "For courage," he said, winking. I sprinkled it on a piece of simit, the sesame-crusted bread I'd grown fond of, and ate it slowly, savoring the tang. Courage. I hadn't thought I needed it until Sarah's words echoed again, "You're too old." Maybe courage wasn't about strength, but about choosing to move forward anyway. I wandered to the Suleimani Mosque, its domes rising like silent promises against the sky. Inside, the silence was profound, broken only by soft murmurs of prayer. I sat on the carpet, my back against a pillar, and watched the light filter through stained glass. A young boy, no older than 10, approached me, his curiosity bolder than his English. "Why you here, grandfather?" he asked. The word grandfather caught me off guard. But I smiled. To see the world, I said simply. He grinned, as if that was the most obvious answer in the world, and ran off. I envied his freedom, his unburdened belief that the world was his to explore. But I wasn't so different. Was I? Not yet. My phone buzzed again, Michael this time. I ignored it, but guilt gnawed at me. They were worried, and I wasn't heartless. I sent a brief text. I'm fine. In Istanbul. Don't worry. I knew it wouldn't ease their fears, but it was all I could offer for now. That afternoon, I met Isla again at the Grand Bazaar. She waved me over, her stall now crowded with tourists. You came back, she said, handing me another cup of tea. Most don't. Most don't know what they're missing, I replied, and she laughed again, that familiar sound that tugged at my heart. We talked for hours, her stories of growing up in Istanbul weaving with mine of travels with Emily. She listened, not with pity, but with genuine interest, as if my age made my stories richer, not irrelevant. You remind me of my Baban, she said, her voice softening. My grandmother. She used to say life is a carpet, you weave it one thread at a time, and you don't stop until it's done. I bought a scarf from her, not because I needed it, but because I wanted a piece of this moment. It was deep blue, like the Bosphorus at dusk, and I draped it over my shoulders, feeling its weight like a promise. The next day, I took a ferry across the Bosphorus to the Asian side of the city. The water was restless, reflecting the gray clouds above, but I stood at the rail, letting the wind whip through my hair. An older woman, her headscarf fluttering, stood beside me. She didn't speak English, but we shared a quiet moment, pointing at seagulls and smiling. Sometimes, connection didn't need words. Back on land, I explored Katakoy's markets, where the air smelled of fish and fresh herbs. I bought a small notebook from a street vendor, its cover embossed with a crescent moon, and began sketching the faces I'd seen the boy at the mosque, the sumac vendor, Isla. Each face was a story, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this journey. By evening, I sat in a cafe, sipping thick Turkish coffee and reading the grounds left in the cup. The waiter, a young man with a quick smile, offered to interpret them. Adventure, he said, pointing to a shape that looked vaguely like a bird. And family. They're waiting for you. He was right. Of course. Sarah and Michael were probably frantic by now, their Paris trip overshadowed by my disappearance. I opened my journal and wrote, they think I'm running from them, but I'm running to me. I hope they'll understand someday. That night, I dreamed of Emily. She was young again, her hair loose, her eyes bright as we danced in a piazza somewhere in Italy. Keep going, James, she whispered. Don't let them clip your wings. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't sad. They were fuel. The next morning, I decided to push further. I booked a train to Cappadocia, a place Emily had always wanted to see, with its fairy chimneys and ancient caves. The journey was long, the train rattling through landscapes that shifted from urban sprawl to rolling hills. I shared a compartment with a Turkish familia mother, father, and two children who offered me homemade borek. We communicated through gestures and laughter, and for a moment, I felt like I belonged. Cappadocia was otherworldly. The rock formations rose like sculptures carved by a whimsical god, and the sky was a canvas for hot air balloons at dawn. I didn't join them, knees wouldn't have thanked me, but I watched from a hilltop, my breath catching at the sight. This was why I'd come. Not to prove a point, but to feel this awe, this wonder, this proof that the world was still vast and I was still part of it. I wrote to Sarah and Michael that night, a long email I didn't send. I needed to find the right words, to make them see that this wasn't about abandoning them. It was about honoring the man Emily had loved, the man I still was. I ended the letter with, "I'm not too old to travel. I'm too old to stop." Cappadocia's mornings were a revelation. The sky burned pink and gold, and the balloons floated like dreams against it. I sat on a stone bench, my journal open, sketching the jagged outlines of the fairy chimneys. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the cold and the weight of what I was chasing. Freedom, maybe, or just the right to choose it. The town of Gorim was small, its streets winding through cave hotels and ancient churches carved into rock. I checked into a modest pension, its walls cool and smooth, like stepping into history. The owner, a wiry man named Hassan, welcomed me with a glass of pomegranate juice. "You're brave," he said, eyeing my suitcase. "Most your age stay home." I chuckled. "My kids think I should." He shook his head, his eyes crinkling. "Home is good, but the world is better." I spent the day exploring the open-air museum, where frescoes of saints stared down from cave ceilings, their colors faded but defiant. My guide, a young woman named Elif, spoke with passion about the monks who'd carved these sanctuaries centuries ago. "They hid here," she said, "to keep their faith alive." I wondered if I was hiding too, from my children's expectations, from the life they wanted for me. That evening, I joined a group of travelers around a fire pit at the pension. They were young backpackers from Australia, a couple from Brazil, a solo traveler from Japan. I felt like an anomaly, but they didn't treat me that way. They shared their wine and stories, and I shared mine, telling them about Emily and our adventures. The Australian girl, Lily, leaned forward, her eyes wide. "You're living the dream, mate," she said. "Most people give up by your age." Her words hit harder than I expected. Had I been on the verge of giving up? Had Sarah and Michael's fears almost convinced me to stay put, to let the house become my world? I sipped the wine, its warmth spreading through me, and shook my head. "Not me," I said. "Not yet." The next day, I hiked through the Rose Valley, my boots crunching on the dusty path. My knee protested, but I ignored it, focusing on the surreal landscape, pink stone glowing under the sun, caves like secrets waiting to be explored. A local farmer, tending to his vineyard, offered me a handful of grapes. They were sweet, bursting with juice, and I thanked him in my clumsy Turkish. He waved me off with a smile, as if my effort was enough. I found a cave to rest in, its interior cool and shadowed. I sat against the wall, pulling out Emily's scarf and pressing it to my face. "You'd love this," I whispered. "You'd be right here with me." The silence answered, but it wasn't empty. It was full of her, of us. My phone had no signal in the valley, but I didn't mind. The quiet let me think, let me write. I filled pages with descriptions of the landscape, the people, the way the air tasted of dust and possibility. I wrote about Sarah and Michael too, trying to understand their fear. They weren't wrong to worry I was old, my body slower than it used to be. But they didn't see what I saw, that slowing down didn't mean stopping. That night, I finally sent the email I drafted. I told them about Istanbul, about Ayla and Mehmet, about the balloons in Cappadocia. I told them I wasn't running away, that I was living for me, for Emily, for the years we'd planned but never got. I ended with, "I love you both, but I'm not done yet." The next morning, I woke to a reply from Sarah. It was short, tense. "Dad, please come home. We're worried sick." Michael's was longer, softer, but still pleading, "We just want you safe. Call us." I read them over breakfast. My heart heavy but resolute. They didn't understand yet. But maybe they would. Someday. I decided to keep moving. I booked a bus to Antalya, on Turkey's southern coast, craving the sea. The journey was long, the roads winding through mountains that seemed to touch the stars. I shared the bus with a mix of locals and tourists, their conversations a hum of languages I couldn't parse. A young man, maybe college-aged, offered me his window seat. "Better view," he said in accented English. I thanked him, watching the landscape shift from rugged peaks to olive groves. The sea appeared suddenly, a ribbon of turquoise that made my breath catch. Emily had loved the ocean, its endless rhythm. I felt her presence again, not as a ghost, but as a companion, urging me forward. Antalya was warm, its air heavy with salt and jasmine. I checked into a small hotel near the old town, its balcony overlooking the harbor. The water sparkled under the midday sun, and I spent the afternoon wandering Kaliyasai's narrow streets, where bougainvilleas spilled over stone walls. A street musician played a haunting tune on an oud, and I dropped a few lira into his case, lingering to listen. The music felt like a bridge between past and present, between who I was and who I was becoming. That evening, I sat at a seaside cafe, eating grilled fish and watching the waves. A family at the next table laughed loudly, their joy infectious. The father, about my age, caught my eye and raised his glass. I raised mine back, a silent toast to shared moments. I wasn't alone. Not really. The world was full of people, of stories, of connections waiting to be made. I wrote in my journal, "I'm not too old to travel. I'm too old to let fear win." The words felt like a vow, one I'd keep for as long as I could. Antalya's warmth seeped into my bones, loosening the ache in my joints. I woke to the sound of gulls and the distant hum of fishing boats. The hotel's balcony became my morning ritual, a cup of tea in hand as I watched the harbor come alive. The sea was a mirror for my thoughts, reflecting questions I hadn't dared ask at home. Was I being selfish? Was this journey worth the worry I'd caused Sarah and Michael? The answers didn't come, but the act of asking felt like progress. I spent my days exploring the old town, its cobblestone streets a maze of history. I visited Hadrian's Gate, its marble arches worn but proud, and imagined the countless souls who'd passed through it. A young couple asked me to take their photo, their smiles bright against the ancient stone. I obliged, feeling a pang of envy for their youth, their ease. But envy faded when I remembered my own path different, slower, but no less vibrant. One afternoon, I took a bus to the ancient city of Purge, its ruins sprawling under a relentless sun. The guide, a woman named Zainab, noticed my limp and offered me a bottle of water. "You're a long way from home," she said, her tone kind but curious. "Home's where I make it," I replied, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. She smiled, as if she understood. The ruins were a testament to time columns broken but standing, mosaics faded but beautiful. I sat on a stone bench, sketching the amphitheater in my notebook. A group of schoolchildren ran past, their laughter echoing off the stones. One boy stopped, peering at my sketch. "You're good," he said in halting English, then darted off before I could respond. His words stayed with me, a small gift. Back in Antalya, I wandered to a small mosque tucked behind a market. Its simplicity was a contrast to the grandeur of Istanbul's mosques, but it felt intimate, like a secret shared. I sat outside, listening to the call to prayer, its melody weaving through the evening air. A man my age, his beard white as snow, sat beside me. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough. Sometimes, Silence was the best conversation. My phone buzzed again. Sarah. I answered this time, bracing for her anger. Dad, where are you now? Her voice was sharp but trembling. And Talia, I said. It's beautiful here. Sarah, you'd love the sea. She sighed, a sound heavy with exasperation. You can't just run off like this. We thought something happened. I'm fine, I said, softer now. I needed this. I need you to trust me. There was a long pause. Then, we're coming home early. Just stay safe. Okay. I promised I would, but I didn't promise to stop. After the call, I felt lighter, as if her voice had reminded me of the love behind her worry. I wrote to Michael, telling him about Purge, about the schoolboy and the ruins. I ended with, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to live. The next day, I booked a boat tour along the coast. The water was impossibly clear, revealing schools of fish darting beneath the surface. The captain, a grizzled man named Orhan, shared stories of his life at sea. The ocean doesn't care about your age, he said, squinting at the horizon. It only cares if you respect it. I respected it, the way I respected the pull of the world. I leaned over the rail, letting the spray hit my face, and thought of Emily. She'd have been right beside me, her hand in mine, laughing at the wind. I tied her scarf around my wrist, a talisman against doubt. That evening, I wandered to a cliffside restaurant, its tables lit by lanterns. The waiter, a young man with a quick smile, recommended the mise, and I savored every bite. Hummus, stuffed grape leaves, spicy esme. A group of musicians played nearby, their saz and darbuka filling the air with rhythm. I tapped my foot, feeling younger than I had in years. A woman at the next table, maybe in her 50s, struck up a conversation. Her name was Claire, a Canadian artist traveling alone. You've got a spark, she said, her eyes studying me. Most people lose it by now. I almost did, I admitted. But I'm finding it again. She nodded, as if she understood. We talked late into the night, sharing stories of our travels, our losses. She'd lost her husband too, and her journey was her way of keeping him close. They're always with us, she said, touching her wedding ring. In the places we go? I thought of Emily's scarf, of the journal filled with my sketches and thoughts. Claire was right, they were with us. In every step, every memory we made. I went to bed that night with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I decided to head east, to Gaziantep, known for its food and history. The bus ride was long, but I didn't mind. The landscape changed again, from coastal cliffs to arid plains, each mile a reminder of the world's vastness. I shared the ride with a family who offered me pistachios, their laughter a balm for the solitude of travel. Gaziantep was a feast for the senses. The markets overflowed with baklava, its layers glistening with syrup, and kebabs sizzling on open grills. I checked into a small guest house, its courtyard shaded by fig trees. The owner, a woman named Fatma, welcomed me with a tray of tea and sweets. You're far from home, she said, echoing Zainab's words. I'm finding it, I said, and she smiled, as if she knew exactly what I meant. Gaziantep was a city of flavors and stories, its streets alive with the clatter of copper pots and the chatter of vendors. I woke to the scent of fresh bread wafting from the guest house kitchen, where Fatma was already at work. She handed me a plate of katmer, its flaky layers dripping with pistachio and cream. Eat, she said, her eyes warm. You need strength for the road. I didn't know where the road would take me next, but I was starting to trust it. After breakfast, I wandered to the Zeugma Mosaic Museum, its halls filled with ancient tiles that told stories of gods and heroes. The mosaics were breathtaking, their colors vivid despite the centuries. I sketched Oni woman with eyes that seemed to follow me, her expression both fierce and tender. I wondered who she'd been, what she'd fought for. A museum guard, an older man with a kind face, noticed my sketch. "You're an artist," he said, his English slow but clear. "Just a traveler," I replied, but his words warmed me. I hadn't thought of myself as an artist, but maybe I was painting my life with moments, with choices. That afternoon, I joined a food tour, led by a young chef named Barak. He took us through the markets, introducing us to spices and dishes I'd never heard of. Flamakin, Ali Natzik, baklava so delicate it melted on my tongue. The group was small, a mix of tourists and locals, and we bonded over shared plates and laughter. A German couple, Hans and Ingrid, asked about my journey. I told them about Istanbul, Cappadocia, Antalya, about leaving my children's expectations behind. "You're brave," Ingrid said, echoing Hassan's words. "Our children want us to stay put too, but we're not ready." I nodded, feeling a kinship. We're never ready until we decide we are. That evening, I sat in the guest house courtyard, sipping tea under the fig trees. My phone buzzed. Michael. I answered, ready for another plea. "Dad, we're home," he said, his voice tight. "Where are you now?" "Gaziantep," I said, eating my weight in baklava. He laughed, a small crack in his worry. "You're impossible." "Sarah's still mad. But we're trying to understand." "Try harder," I said, but gently. "I'm not doing this to hurt you." "I know," he said, and for the first time, I felt he might mean it. We talked longer. About the mosaics, the food, the people I'd met. He listened, and I hoped he was starting to see Minute just as Dad, but as James. The next day, I visited the Gaziantep castle, its stone walls weathered but unyielding. From the top, I could see the city sprawling below, a blend of old and new. I thought of Sarah and Michael, of the home I'd left behind. I loved them, but I couldn't live for them alone. This journey was mine, a reclaiming of the man I'd been before grief and age tried to define me. I wrote in my journal, "They're learning to let me go. I'm learning to let myself live." The next morning, I decided to head to Sanliurfa, a city steeped in history and spirituality. The bus ride was quiet, the landscape stark and beautiful, dotted with olive trees and ancient ruins. I shared the ride with a young woman, a student named Layla, who was studying archaeology. She spoke passionately about Urfa's past, its role as a cradle of civilization. "Every stone has a story," she said, her eyes bright. I showed her my sketches, and she flipped through them, pausing at the mosaic woman. "She's like you," she said, "old, but strong." I laughed, but her words stayed with me. Old, but strong. I like that. Sanliurfa was hotter than Gaziantep, its air thick with dust and reverence. I checked into a small hotel near the Baliklegal, the sacred fish pool said to mark the spot where Abraham was saved from fire. The pools were serene, the fish darting through the water like living prayers. I sat by the edge, watching families toss breadcrumbs, their laughter mingling with the splash of water. A man my age, dressed in traditional robes, sat beside me. His name was Ismail, and he spoke of Urfa's legends with a quiet passion. "This place teaches us faith," he said, "not just in God, but in ourselves." I nodded, thinking of my own faith, the belief that had carried me from my kitchen to this moment. I hadn't planned this journey. Not really. But each step felt right, like a path I was meant to walk. That evening, I wandered to the bazaar. Its alleys crowded with vendors selling everything from spices to prayer beads. I bought a small amulet, a simple stone carved with a crescent moon, and tucked it into my pocket. It felt like a piece of Urfa, a reminder of this moment. I called Sarah that night, expecting her anger, but hoping for something else. "Dad," she said, her voice softer now. "I read your email. I'm trying to understand. But it's hard." "I know," I said, "but I need you to trust me. I'm not running away. I'm finding myself." She was quiet for a long time, then said, "Just keep telling us where you are." "Okay." I promised I would. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a start. Sanliurfa's heat clung to me, but its spirit was cooling, like a balm for the soul. I spent my days wandering its ancient sites. Göbekli Tepe, with its enigmatic stone pillars, felt like a conversation with the past. The archaeologist leading the tour, a woman named Selin, spoke of the site's mysteries with a reverence that mirrored my own awe. "We're still learning what it means," she said, brushing dirt from a carved stone. "But it reminds us how little we know." I sketched the pillars, their shapes strange and haunting. My hands were steadier now, as if the act of drawing grounded me. A young volunteer, a boy named Arda, watched me work. "You see things differently," he said, his English halting but earnest. "Like you know the stones." "I'm just listening," I replied, and he nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Back in the city, I visited the Halil Rahman Mosque, its courtyard peaceful despite the crowds. I sat by the fish pools again, watching the water ripple. Ismail joined me, his presence familiar now. We talked about faith, about family, about the journeys that shape us. "My children live in Ankara," he said. "They want me to move there, to be safe. But this is my home." I understood. Home wasn't just a place, it was the life you built, the choices you made. I told him about Sarah and Michael, about their worry and my defiance. He listened, then said, "They love you. That's why they fear. Show them you're strong, and they'll learn." His words echoed as I walked back to the hotel, the amulet in my pocket a small weight against my doubts. That night, I wrote a long letter to my children. Not an email, but a real letter. One I'd mail when I could. I told them about Urfa, about the stones and the stories, about the people who'd welcomed me. I told them I wasn't running from them, but toward the man I'd always been. "I'm still your father," I wrote, "but I'm also James. Let me be both." The next morning, I decided to head to Mardin, a city perched on a hill, its stone houses glowing like honey in the sun. The bus ride was dusty, the road winding through barren hills. But the view of Mardin's skyline was worth it. The city felt ancient, its streets narrow and steep, each corner revealing a mosque or a church or a view that stole my breath. I checked into a guest house run by a family, their warmth immediate and genuine. The mother, Ice, offered me tea and a plate of kibe, her hands quick and sure. Her son, Sem, was studying to be a teacher and practiced his English with me, asking about America, about my travels. "You're old," he said, then blushed. "I mean, older. But you don't act it." I laughed. "I'm trying not to." Mardin's history was layered: Christian, Muslim, Kurdish, a tapestry of voices. I visited the Deir el-Zafran monastery, its golden walls a testament to resilience. The monk who guided me, Brother Gabriel, was quiet but kind, his eyes carrying the weight of years. "We preserve what matters," he said, showing me ancient manuscripts. "Not just for us, but for those who come after." I thought of my children, of the legacy I wanted to leave them. Not just a house, but a life lived fully, fearlessly. I sketched the monastery's arches, the lines flowing easily now, as if my hands had found their rhythm. That evening, I sat on a rooftop, watching the sunset over the Mesopotamian plains. The sky was a blaze of orange and purple, and I felt small but whole. My phone buzzed. Michael again. "Dad, your letter arrived," he said, his voice softer than before. "Sarah cried reading it. We're starting to get it." I smiled, relief washing over me. "I'm glad," I said. "I'm in Martin now. It's beautiful." "Send pictures," he said, and I promised I would. The next day, I wandered Martin's bazaar, its stalls overflowing with silver jewelry and woven rugs. A vendor, an old woman with a face like a map, offered me a copper coffee pot. "For memories," she said, her voice raspy but warm. I bought it, not because I needed it, but because it felt like a piece of this place, this moment. I met a group of travelers at a cafe, their stories as varied as the city's history. A French photographer, Marie, shared her photos of Martin's rooftops, their beauty stark and timeless. "You're not like most tourists," she said, studying me. "You're searching for something." "Aren't we all?" I replied, and she smiled, raising her glass. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not too old to search. I'm too old to stop." The words felt like a mantra, a promise to myself and to Emily. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Martin's golden light lingered in my memory as I planned my next move. The city had woven itself into me, its stones and stories a reminder that age was just a layer, not the whole. I decided to head north, to Trabzon, on the Black Sea coast. The journey was long, the bus winding through mountains that seemed to guard their secrets. I shared the ride with a quiet man named Yusuf, a retired teacher who spoke of the sea with a poet's reverence. "It's alive," he said, his eyes distant. "It speaks if you listen." I listened, not just to him, but to the hum of the road, the rhythm of my own heart. Trabzon greeted me with cool air and the scent of salt. I checked into a small hotel near the shore, its windows open to the sea's endless song. The owner, a woman named Esra, welcomed me with tea and a plate of hamsi, tiny fried fish that crunched with flavor. "You're far from home," she said, echoing words I'd heard before. "Home's where I am," I replied, and she nodded, as if she'd heard it all before. The Black Sea was wilder than Antalya's calm waters, its waves crashing against cliffs with a force that felt alive. I walked along the shore, Emily's scarf tied around my wrist, its threads fraying but holding. The wind carried memories of her laughter, of our dreams, of the life we'd built. I wasn't running from grief, but weaving it into something new. I visited the Sumala Monastery, perched impossibly on a cliff, its frescoes faded but haunting. The climb was hard, my knee protesting every step. But I made it, leaning on a stick I'd found along the path. A young monk, his face smooth but serious, offered me water. "You're determined," he said, his English careful. "Stubborn. Maybe," I replied, and he laughed, a sound that echoed off the stone. The view from the monastery was breathtaking, the mountains stretching to the horizon. I sat on a bench, sketching the cliffs, the sea, the sky. A group of tourists passed, their voices loud, their cameras flashing. 1. A woman in her 40s paused to look at my sketch. "That's beautiful," she said. "You've got a gift." "It's just practice," I said, but her words warmed me. Practice. That's what this journey was, practicing life. Practicing courage. Practicing me. That evening, I called Sarah. She answered on the first ring, her voice softer than before. "Dad, your pictures are amazing," she said. "Martin looks like a dream." "It is," I said. "I'm in Trabzon now. The sea's incredible." She hesitated, then said, "I'm sorry I said you were too old. I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said, my throat tight. "I'm right here, Sarah. Just living." We talked longer. About the monastery, the fish, the people I'd met. She listened, and I felt the gap between us narrowing. Not gone, but smaller. Michael texted later, "Keep the pictures coming. We're proud of you." Proud. The word hit me hard. A gift I hadn't expected. The next day, I explored Trabzon's bazaar. Its stalls crowded with tea, hazelnuts, and handmade knives. I bought a small tea glass, its rim etched with waves, and imagined sharing it with Emily. A vendor, a man my age, told me stories of the Silk Road, of traders who'd passed through centuries ago. "We're all travelers," he said, handing me a handful of hazelnuts. "Some just forget." I didn't want to forget. I spent the afternoon at the Hagia Sophia of Trabzon, a smaller echo of Istanbul's masterpiece. Its frescoes were worn, but their beauty lingered, like memories that refused to fade. I sat in the quiet, letting the past and present blur, feeling whole in a way I hadn't in years. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I'm not too old to live. I'm too old to forget who I am." The words felt like a vow, one I'd keep for Emily, for my children, for myself. The next morning, I decided to head to Rise, known for its tea plantations and misty hills. The bus ride was short but stunning, the road flanked by green slopes and distant peaks. I checked into a guest house overlooking a tea field, its rows stretching like a quilt under the fog. The owner, a young man named Karam, offered me tea so fresh it tasted like the earth itself. Rise was quieter than Trabzon, its rhythm slower. I walked through the plantations, the air damp and cool, the leaves brushing my fingers. A farmer, an older woman with a quick smile, showed me how to pick the leaves, her hands deft despite her age. "Tea is patience," she said, her English broken but clear. "You wait, you work, you taste." I thought of my journey: patience, work, taste. Each step had been a choice, each moment a flavor. I sketched the plantation, the woman's hands, the mist. My notebook was filling up, a record of a life I was reclaiming. That evening, I sat on the guest house porch, sipping tea and watching the fog roll in. My phone buzzed, a video call from Sarah and Michael. Their faces filled the screen, tired but warm. "Dad, you look happy," Sarah said, her eyes searching mine. "I am," I said, and meant it. "I'm coming home soon. But not yet." They nodded, and for the first time, I felt they understood. Not fully, but enough. Rise's mist clung to the hills, softening the world into a dream. I spent my last days there wandering the tea fields, my boots muddy, my heart full. The air was sharp with the scent of leaves, and I felt Emily in every breeze, her presence a quiet encouragement. I wasn't ready to go home, but I knew the journey was nearing its end, not because I was done, but because I'd found what I needed. I called Sarah and Michael daily now, sharing stories of the tea farmers, the sea, The people who'd become part of my story. Their voices were lighter. Their questions less about worry and more about curiosity. "What's next, Dad?" Michael asked one evening, a smile in his voice. "Home," I said, but not to stop, to plan the next one. I spent my final day in Rise visiting the Ader Plateau, a green haven in the mountains. The road was steep, the bus rattling, but the view was worth it. Meadows dotted with wooden houses, waterfalls whispering in the distance. I hiked a short trail, my knee grumbling but manageable, and sat by a stream, sketching the scene. A young couple, honeymooners from Istanbul, asked to see my notebook. "You're an artist," the woman said, her eyes bright. "Just a traveler," I replied, but I was starting to believe I could be both. That night, I wrote my final journal entry in Turkey. "I'm not too old to dream. I'm too old to let dreams die." I packed my suitcase, Emily's scarf tucked carefully inside, and booked a flight home. Not because I was giving up, but because I was ready to face my children as the man I'd rediscovered. The flight back was long, the plane humming with the weight of my thoughts. I flipped through my notebook, its pages filled with sketches and stories, a map of my journey. When I landed, Sarah and Michael were waiting at the airport, their faces a mix of relief and something new pride. "Maybe." Sarah hugged me, her arms tight. "You scared us," she whispered, but there was no anger in her voice. "I needed to scare myself," I said, and she nodded, tears in her eyes. Michael took my suitcase, his smile hesitant but genuine. "You shocked us, Dad. All of it. Istanbul, Cappadocia, the sea. You're unstoppable." I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years. Not unstoppable, just stubborn. We drove home, the familiar streets feeling both foreign and dear. The house was the same, creaking, cluttered, full of memories, but I wasn't. I showed them my sketches, my journal, the scarf I'd bought from Isla, the amulet from Orfa, the tea glass from Trabzon. Each was a piece of the world, a piece of me. Over dinner, I told them about the people I'd met at Champs-Élysées. Isla, Mehmet, Claire. They listened, their eyes wide, and I realized they weren't just hearing me, they were seeing me. "You're different," Sarah said, her voice soft, stronger, somehow. "I'm me," I said simply. "Just more of me." That night, I sat in my study, the world map still pinned to the wall. I traced my finger along Turkey, the route I'd taken, and felt a surge of gratitude. For Emily, who'd taught me to live. For my children, who loved me enough to let me go. For the world, which was still waiting. I wasn't too old to travel. I was just old enough to know why. The next morning, I woke early, the house quiet. I made coffee, sat by the window, and opened my journal. A new page, a new plan. Maybe Greece next, or Japan. The world was still out there, and so was I.